let's get the Superman we know up and running. Let him have his spotlight before you start, just like in the comics. It's like before you start saying, here's your cousin, here's your dog.
Well, hello again, Mr. Jones.
How have you been?
Pretty good. I've been absorbing all this crazy news.
I tell you,
trying to make sense of it now at this point.
It's crazy. It's cuckoo nutty, especially people who are going to be listening to this and have listened to others. We do seem to only come around to one or two topics.
Yeah.
But I will say, in the case of the DCEU, and I texted you this last night, it's like, we don't want to just be the James Gunn podcast or the DCEU podcast, but things are hopping in that world. Not that we're historic. A news source. Yeah, it's unfolding literally day to day, because was it the last one where we were talking about, are they going to keep Cavill, get rid of Cavill, and how are they going to work with it? And then the day after, they drop Cavill. So, I mean, this is news, and news that actually I think ripples out past, the pure nerds. Ooh, boy, I'm not gatekeeping pure nerds. I'm just saying it goes past us that are like, ooh, I love a Superman comic and Superman movies or whatever. It goes to, oh, good. Here comes the fire truck I ordered is showing up. There it is. I live on the tough side of Portland. Yeah, it's honk the horn. No, the
these apps.
The thing is, I'm sure someone has accidentally set their Christmas tree on fire. Yeah, people that love movies, because Henry Cavill has a fan base that goes past, Superman. But I feel bad for the guy. I think he's handled it very graciously. He's put a good face on it. And like I was saying to John last night, I think that weirdly, I mean, obviously he'll land on his feet. I'm not too worried about, will Henry Cavill work again? But he instantly was able to swivel over to another dream project of his. I'm sad he never got to play the Superman we all wanted him to play, but he got to be Superman. He got to be Geralt of Rivia in The Witcher, which is another dream thing of his because he loves the games. And now he's doing an entire series based on his absolute favorite game, Warhammer 4000, which I got to say, I don't give a shit about. I've never played it. but I mean, the thing is, for him, his disappointment is still wrapped up in this golden thing because he's just like moved on to another dream project of his. It's not like he's like, I guess I could do a couple of rom-coms or something. It's like, no, they're like, what else do you want to do, Henry? Well, I love Warhammer. And they're like, great.
Stay right there.
Yeah, hold on. I've got the Warhammer guys on the other line. I do think that that it is so drastic. It's what we were talking about as a possibility. Are they just going to scrap everything and start fresh? And it looks like that is the case.
There is some. James has been, Mr. Gunn has been throwing out some very confusing statements on
Jimmy.
Twitter.
You can call him Jimmy. I know you guys are tight.
Jimbo. Jimbo Gunn.
Jimbo Gunn. Ooh, that's a really good name. Especially if you were like an MMF, was it the MF, what is the thing? The MFF, fighting?
WF, I don't know.
Yeah. Boy, that
wrestling deal.
No, I was talking about the mixed martial arts. That's it.
Okay.
But yeah, it sounds like he would be one of those guys. Jimbo Gunn.
Jimbo Gunn, yeah. But he's been, some of the tweets, some of the replies he's been giving on Twitter, it seemed like he's deliberately keeping things hazy and keeping us guessing, because I have this feeling that he really doesn't want to announce this until he announces it, which is supposed to be in the new year. He said every big piece of news we've gotten since he was hired has come from other sources. We had the Hollywood Reporter, then we had Patty Jenkins dropping her statement, then we had Henry Cavill dropping his statement, and in the midst of that, James is coming in and saying yes, but no, and maybe, and this and that. I
think he's doing a very good job of being as transparent as he can be within the obvious, because no one literally comes in and says, here's what to expect for the next 8 films or blah, 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 until they do a big rollout like that. So what he's doing is he's addressing rumors, and he's doing a good job of trying to keep people calm because he's having to deal with, generally there's a lot of like, oh, I don't know if that's going to work, but that's the calm thing. There are plenty of the Snyder fans and the hardcore people who are just laying into them. And so the one that I directed you to was his long sort of statement saying, guys, look, we knew we were going to get this kind of feedback, but you can go ahead and do boycotts and your online things, and you can slam us. It's not going to change our ideas here because we're going from character and story first, and whatever serves the umbrella that we're trying to bring out is what we're going with. So your campaigns and stuff, you need to calm down and get over it. And he's being both a little snarky, but he's also being totally just upfront going, no, guys, you can call me names. It's fine. But we're taking this from the approach of we are servicing that universe of characters. And what came before, if you liked it, we're very happy you did. However, we're not going forward in the same direction. And that's both me going like, that's very well stated, but I'm on the other side of going, yes, because it sounds to me like the right tack. Yeah. And I was saying to John, like, Snyder had his go, and it didn't quite work. It didn't work for a lot of fans, but it worked for some people. But literally, he's not beholden to anything, and he's coming from. And I said, look, if James Gunn's Superman comes out and it's terrible, it might be. Who knows? Can't predict it. I will still respect the whole decision of like, no, we are not going to pick up threads left behind. We are doing what we think should have been done from the beginning. And I'm like, yeah.
Yeah. There is one, the most confusing thing he said recently, I think like in the past 24 hours, was responding to somebody had tweeted at him saying, it's just a real shame you gave Cavill and Gal Gadot the boot or something like that. And he goes, I don't know where you got the idea that we booted Gal. And so it's like another one of these things like, what? Wait a minute. What is happening? It's a very vague statement.
Yeah, it could also be wording. It could be like when they scrapped Wonder Woman 3, Gal may have said, oh, well, I'm going with Patty, and that's what I wanted to do. So technically, they wouldn't have booted her. She would have said, yeah, I don't want to. Good luck to you. She could have walked. Or she might come back. I mean, look, I was totally fine with Henry Cavill coming back and Gal Gadot coming back as long as the movies were not beholden to what came before, because the actors are not the problem here. They're really not.
No, yeah. But he did say another tweet too. He said, look, really the only reason we let Henry go is because we're going with a younger version of the character. I'm like, that seems like, I don't believe that. That seems like he's not really being completely honest.
I don't know. I mean, he has settled on a story that he himself is writing. So it is possible, whether or not it's a year one, because he said, no, we're not doing the origin again. But it could be something like Birthright, where he's like, I just want to see the guy develop or early days of Superman, his first contact with an alien other than himself, maybe like Brainiac or something, not Kryptonian villains, not going with Zod again. All of that, if that is the idea, I mean, again, I'm on board for what he has in mind. And it's also possible. This is what I always said to John is always very forgiving. Like with characters that have had actors attached, he's okay with them going on forever. Like he has no problem. Like, well, Hugh Jackman coming back as Wolverine. I'm like going, well, he's a very fit man in his 50s, but don't you want to restart a franchise and recast? Because if you're doing, let's say you get 4 movies out of the X-Men, the classic characters or whatever, that is over a decade. And people age. The characters don't. And so if you're starting a franchise with Henry Cavill, who is 39? Yeah, I think he is exactly. He's not quite 40. And of course, the man looks like a god. But I'm just saying, you start a franchise of Superman movies not connected to the previous ones, and you start with a guy who's 40. by the fourth movie or the third movie, he will be almost 50 or 50.
That's a good point.
Yeah, it's like when you restart a franchise, that's why I'm sitting there going like, I love Patrick Stewart as Professor X, but the man is 83 years old, or whatever. And it's like, no, it's time to either let McAvoy take over completely or find a new guy. Chad, I'm putting your name in the ring because I mean, this so works. All of this works. I could definitely see you doing this. Just do this for half a second because you got the cans on. It's like Cerebro go, to me, my X-Men. That is Professor X. Now, so I think that recasting is the good idea because I think in his mind, this is me trying to predict him and Peter Safran. I think they just like, if we're starting fresh, let's start early in their careers. So we have young people who grow into the roles and also won't be too old by the time we get to the fourth movie or the Justice League movie or whatever. And some people are thinking they're going to jump right into Justice League. And I don't, but again, this is all rumor and stuff.
Right. Yeah. That was something we were discussing last week. And yeah, it looks like he's not, I mean, we don't know. I mean, we know that he's writing Superman. If Gunn is actively
writing Superman, then they're probably going to start with Superman.
That's what I would assume. Yeah. But we haven't actually been told what the slate order is going to be or what they're actually planning to do specifically.
It's all speculation. I just am cautiously excited because I like what he has done before. Mm-hmm. I trust his sensibilities. I trust him to write something that is right for the character and not a James Gunn production. You know, it's like, okay, maybe not wacky needle drops, you know, maybe not suddenly Black Betty shows up and like Superman's first actually suddenly has got something from, I don't know, some kind of crazy funk thing comes in. Oh, right. Parliament Funkadelic. Perfect for Superman beating up some villains. I can only hope that it's going to be good, but I am not one of the ones crying because what came before got scrapped. And people going, well, why should anyone even go see Aquaman 2? Why should they go see The Flash or Blue Beetle or whatever? I'm like, because they're probably, who knows? They might be entertaining. Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean you shouldn't go see them. It just means that you won't get a sequel.
Right. And I'm kind of, I mean, I said this last week that I think it would be nice if Cavill got one more like sunset movie, like see ya. But clearly they've got bigger fish to fry right now. But it was kind of disappointing too to hear, and I understand why they're doing it because of where they thought it was going. There was a cameo that they had shot for Flash, which now has reportedly been cut. Like, that's a shame. I don't know what's going on with Aquaman, but it would be nice with these two things that are still left if they could try to tie it up. Well, bit.
I don't know if Gunn is thinking of hanging on to a multiversal idea because maybe when he scraps it, he's like, we're not even doing a multiverse. Yeah, if they do, who knows? 5 years from now, after the first couple of successful Gunn movies or the first Justice League, maybe they do like a Crisis on Infinite Earths thing or a multiversal thing, the Flash of Two Worlds kind of deal or something where Cavill is asked back and he's like, yeah, I'll put it on one more time. And it's like, great. So Cavill meets the new guy. And it's like, oh, hey, I'm you from another universe. Great. And finally, Michael Keaton, again, at the age of 75 is like, hi, I'm Batman. Still Batman. I'd love it if there's a scene. I always loved it in the comics when like the JLA and the JSA would meet. You know, our friends from Earth 2 have come over. It's like, oh, great, yeah, and they're all hanging out. But I'd love it if it were more like real life, where they have like name tags and they're like going, and you are, oh, Dr. Midnight. Yeah. Oh, right. Dr. Midnight. Yeah, great. Nice to meet you. It's like, you have the new Superman going up to Michael Keaton and going, and you are, oh, you're Bruce. Oh, but you're like other Bruce. Nice to meet you, other Bruce.
Yeah. I don't know, but we're getting back into speculation town here. But
speculation town's where I live.
Knowing that James is essentially the same age, he's a little older than us, but he grew up with in the same era of DC that we did.
Yeah. It's all about Super Friends. You can tell already that he is trying to make a Super Friends movie.
Yeah. I was reminded. Sorry. What was that line you used to always say? Meanwhile, Superman and Batman streak to the planet's surface.
That's exactly it.
You used to throw that line.
I just love that Ted Knight, the great Ted Knight, did so many voices on that, including the narrator. And the narrator was always like, meanwhile, so Superman and Batman streak towards the planet's surface.
Yeah.
And the whole thing about the episode where my favorite one where they get they're being overtaken by a voodoo power, and Batman and Robin walk into the Hall of Justice and their eyes are red and they're like walking like zombies, and Superman goes, obviously they're under some sort of voodoo curse.
Yeah.
Wow, Superman, you are brilliant. You could just see him like, nope. You know what that is? Voodoo curse. That's totally voodoo curse right there.
This is really, I mean, James Gunn's brilliance with the stuff he's done with both the Suicide Squad and Guardians of the Galaxy, that he manages to weave in a little bit of that kitschiness.
Yes, he does.
Without sacrificing the gravitas or the actual drama that he's trying to go for.
One of my main sources of trust where he's concerned is what we talked about last week, is that and obviously I don't think the tone will be similar if he's doing Justice League or Superman as Suicide Squad, but that guy, even if he's doing the wackiest, goofiest characters, and, you know, Peacemaker goes balls out with weird comedy, but when he wants to, it doesn't feel too jarring because he seeded some pathos or sadness or just some heart into the backstories of the wackiest characters. You care about Groot and Rocket in the Guardians movies because for all the weirdness, wackiness, it's like, oh, there's tragedy in the backstory. And apparently in this third one, we get a lot more of that because we finally see Rocket's origin and all that in this next one. So the guy knows. He knows that to lean too far one way or the other is probably a mistake. So a little lightness in your superhero epic is fine. Also, on the flip side, a little weight and gravitas to your wacky sci-fi superhero adventure is good. One way or the other would still be fun. If Guardians were just comedy and action, you'd be like, that was delightful. But really, where you sit there and go, oh, you're a storyteller, and I trust you, is where you're like, oh, he gave us more. He gave us feels. And you're like, great, thank you. And if there's one thing that Snyder was very resistant on, his idea of feels in Man of Steel is, Superman hugs his mom. And, Clark comes back and hugs his way too young and hot mom. And and you're like, oh, that's okay. And also having his, Pa Kent sacrifice himself for a stupid reason. But like that, I didn't feel anything in those movies because for him, that kind of emotion is something he thinks like, yeah, that's for the critics, but it comes off totally flat. It doesn't read. No. And Gunn, he knows how to do it.
He's got that heart, man. And he kind of reminds me of like the heart that Robin Williams would put into his comedy, because Robin would go nuts with his routines, but there was always like a little message at the end, like, keep that little spark of madness alive. There was always love and kindness in all his insanity. And I also get that vibe from James in a lot of his,
even in his dramatic films and stuff, there would be, it's like, wow, what a likable character. But you always sense, like, you think about his like supporting turns in, Good Will Hunting. You're like, that is a great character, but there's a sadness to it. But it's like, okay, you're not just the crazy dude. I think that is, comedy and drama don't have to be separate. They really should always kind of be together because that's life. So my trust meter is very high with Mr. Gunn. And I will not join the chorus trying to like direct it, because people are not just getting in there saying, boycott him, fuck James Gunn, fire him, bring back the Snyderverse. There are also people that are trying to tell him how to do it. It's like, this is what you need to do. And I'm sitting there going, well, of course, if you asked me, I have plenty of, but I just want to sit back and trust him and see where he goes with it, because that is a job that only those two guys are in charge of. Yeah. And I also hope that if he's writing it, I hope that his radar for who should direct it is good, because that was another Feige thing, is being able to find the right people. Mm-hmm. So I hope that they're both sitting there going, well, I'm going to write it. I'm not directing it, but I know exactly who should. How about this person? And get some of those indie film directors in, like Marvel did. And they're like, what's her name? Is it Chloe Zhao, who they gave Eternals to? Is that her name?
Oh, yeah.
That is underrated. I like that. Me too. And I thought it was the most beautiful looking Marvel movie. And I'm sitting there going, that is gorgeous. I don't know why people didn't respond to it. They're not huge characters, but I thought the movie was good.
Yeah.
So yeah, finding the good talent to take it and make it a human thing. Mm-hmm. I'm ready.
So can I ask you?
Nope.
I know we're not telling James what he should do, because
he's never going to hear this.
He's never going to hear it.
You know what? But since he's not ever going to hear this, James Gunn is a farty fart.
Yeah.
James Gunn eats his own boogers.
Oh my God, I can't believe he said that.
Oh my God. Hey, Jimmy. Hey, you eat your own boogers, Jimmy? He's never going to hear it.
But there are certain, it's impossible for me to not like it would be so cool if he did this. And so I'm getting excited about, I know he's already confirmed, obviously Batman's going to be a big part of the new direction. Green Lantern, he said, yes, Green Lantern is very important. Just great news. But he's also confirmed, so there's going to be some lesser known characters too that we'll be working on, of course. So I'm thinking about all the there's such a rich trove of stuff to pull from that hasn't been done. And I was just recently
now that Marvel's been going so long, they've dipped deep into the well. I mean, if you had told me there was going to be an Eternals movie or a Werewolf by Night TV movie, I would have been like, no fucking way. And the Guardians of the Galaxy, what? You know, it's like, which version? And why would people ever go see that? So they are doing their universe right, obviously. But DC is, like you said, DC's even older, and it has such a deep well. There are so many characters. Are you saying, like, who would you do? Who would you bring in?
Well, there's obvious things I'm pretty sure they're going to get to eventually, if not immediately. Bizarro Superman. If anybody could pull that off and have it work and have it actually mean something and be weighty, it's James.
Yeah.
Bizarro Superman. And this is wacky, but this totally makes sense. And this made me, I was thinking about this when I saw the latest Guardians of the Galaxy trailer, because I know it has a lot to do with Rocket, and his origin. But they land on this, looks like, I don't know if it's a planet or just a neighborhood where it's all anthropomorphic animals. Yeah, and I thought, Earthsea, Captain Carrot.
Are you serious, Captain Carrot? Actually.
And I know that's not Marvel, but I'm thinking.
No, I know.
He's probably a fan of that stuff. And I went back and was revisiting. I have the comic somewhere. It's buried. I dug it up. I had to remind myself of what the origin comic, the first comic was, because Superman's there, and it's actually a really, really kind of a neat story where Superman kind of accidentally discovers Earthsea in this alternate universe. And,
well, don't forget, Superman also discovered Eternia.
What's that?
He-Man and the Masters of the Universe actually debuted in an insert in DC Comics Presents. Superman ended up on Eternia and met He-Man and Skeletor. This is literally, that's canonical. I love the fact that he's like going, oh, and he's very weak there because it's all magic, so he's like going, oh, you are more strong than I, He-Man. That was around the same time. That was the 80s that Captain Carrot came around. And also that was of course, DC made Captain Carrot, as opposed to that was Mattel saying, hey, would you like to have Superman introduce our toys? Thank you.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
I could see the whole Captain Carrot thing being, obviously a kid-focused thing that's actually still canonical. That's just happening off in this different universe.
Well, they did the animated. I didn't see it, but the Legion of Super Pets movie that they did, that's like CG. with Krypto and Ace the Bat Hound and all that.
Oh, okay.
That's on, I think, it should be on HBO Max. And so they did that. And I think something along those lines, like if you did a CG, that does seem like a no-brainer, actually.
That's totally doable. Yeah. He could pull it off. Yeah, it does make me wonder if he is actually going to go in the Krypto direction, which we have not seen really in live action yet. I don't think.
If they bring in Krypto, if they bring in Bizarro, if they bring in Supergirl, I shove that towards, shove that down the line a little bit, because what I really want myself is like, let's get the Superman we know up and running. Let him have his spotlight before you start, just like in the comics. It's like before you start saying, here's your cousin, here's your dog.
Yes.
I want Fortress of Solitude, obviously. You got to have the Fortress. I want Phantom Zone. I want all that stuff. I want the classic shit. I want him to be a reporter. I want all of those things in place. And of course, Luthor and all that. But you don't need to always return to Luthor or General Zod. So having Bizarro like be film 2 or film 3, great. Yeah, and I do want Supergirl in there. She's awesome, but it's always a thing where you don't want to just, though you could. There's no rule that says you have to always start at the beginning, though it sounds like James Gunn is. You could literally have what if they had done a Justice League movie at the very beginning of the DCEU that just acknowledges all that shit has happened? It's like, it's all there. And you're like, oh God, now we're dealing with, Krona. Now we're dealing with all these like bizarre deep cut villains. And they're like, yeah, we don't need to show you how they met. They're already a team. They're meeting on a satellite. It's fun.
Yeah. Well, just to be clear too, it's now called the DCU. They've taken the E out to distinguish. Yeah. Just so people aren't getting confused.
Well, there's nothing that will clear up confusion like changing things. So that's good. The DCU fits better anyway. But I was talking to John about this too, as far as opening up that universe and not just focusing on the main guys. And it was before James Gunn said that. It's just like, there's so many things you could do, especially like Marvel has the series that it's doing where it's like, yeah, we're not doing a feature, but you get Ms. Marvel for 8 episodes, and Moon Knight and all these great things. And I was sitting there going, dude, why not? My idea was do a murder mystery, and the detective is Elongated Man, is Ralph Dibny. If you did a Thin Man type movie with Ralph and Sue, because they were always the married couple that solved mysteries together, and he just happens to be Elongated Man. And I'm like, what if you did a non-superheroic murder mystery with the detective in it actually having the superpower of stretching, and he's just the DC Universe's consulting detective guy, and I love it. And the sparring, the funny banter between husband and wife, give me that. Yeah, it's like he wouldn't even have to be in costume for most of it. He's just like, he can listen in at the door by sitting his ear underneath the door crack, and then the ear just pops up and is listening into stuff. It's like, I know that sounds goofy, but I was like, there's no reason you can't dip into every genre, because Marvel's also done that. They've had their horror things, they've done their political thriller. You had Civil War and Winter Soldier. Jesus, Winter Soldier is a 70s political paranoia thriller with Captain America in it. So that's the thing that I hope that Gunn and company are sitting there going, it's like, yes, we're in a superhero universe, but you can do comedies. You can have a wacky Booster Gold, series or movie. Booster Gold is a good character you could do. And you can have hard-hitting, gritty Batman stuff. You can bounce around. You could do romantic comedies and shit. Sorry, I didn't mean to get all, the languages. I'm working on it. So I think there's room for all of that stuff. Yeah.
And I'm not going to write anything off, because every time I think, there's no way they would do that, somehow somebody figures out how to do it. But Composite Superman, I think it's like the weirdest villain I can think of from the old DC.
If they ever did that, I mean, it did show up
Hats off to you, man, if you pull that off.
They did the a Superman Batman Public Enemies animated movie. Did you ever see that? Based on
No.
the Superman Batman comic. So that was a Jeff Loeb comic, and it was drawn by McGinnis. What's his first name? Can't remember. But the whole thing was Superman and Batman become enemies of the state because Luthor is president. And actually that did happen canonically in DC Comics back in the day. So he sends government-connected superheroes after them. And so you've got like Captain Atom going, I don't want to have to take you in, Superman, because we're friends. But the president says you're a danger and I got to do it. So in other words, all this is cooked up. At the end of it, there's this huge kryptonite meteor that's coming towards Earth. And that's something that Luthor's going, yes, it will destroy him.
Come to daddy.
So there's a new Toy Man at that point. This is like early 2000s. And the new Toy Man is not necessarily a villain. He's this Japanese hyper brilliant kid. And so Batman and Superman go to him for help because he's a brilliant weapon designer. So he builds a rocket that's going, a robot rocket that will take care of the kryptonite meteor, and Superman's going to pilot it, and it's in the shape of Composite Superman. So it's right down the middle, Superman, Batman, and it's in their shape, and the skin is green, just like Composite Superman. And at the last minute, Captain Atom, who feels guilty over the whole thing, says, "You'll die if you take that mission." And so he knocks Superman out. He gets in there, and he goes and stops them.
Oh, cool. Okay.
It was a good storyline in the comics, and then the animated version, they stuck to the story very closely, and it's very good. Mm-hmm. But that's the latest version of Composite Superman I've ever seen.
Yeah.
That is a wacky idea. If they did that, I'd be like, what the fuck? But I said the same thing, like when I'm watching the Marvel movies, and I'm going, I cannot believe, when I watched Hawkeye, the series, which I loved, and I'm like, oh my God, that's the swordsman. It's like the guy that's moving in on Kate Bishop's mom is swordsman, even though he's not in the costume or calling himself that. I'm like, I cannot believe I'm seeing a live action swordsman right now. And then in She-Hulk, they had Leapfrog. Sadly, I had my own idea for a Leapfrog series, but their version, I'll take, whatever. But I was like, oh my God, Leapfrog? Are you kidding me? What's next? Stiltman, the movie? I cannot wait.
Yeah.
Stiltman. But yes, that is the way is open. If they're successful, if the Superman movie and whatever they're doing next, if they hit big, then like Marvel, they can sit back and say, all right, let's do some TV series. Let's launch this. Let's do this. And it's exciting.
The thing I keep thinking about with the Suicide Squad, it just makes me think that it's everything's on the table. Like, is Starro. He actually pulled Starro off and made it at once appropriately ridiculous, but also horrifying.
Yeah,
in the same movie. Yeah, and that was incredible.
Yeah, so, and made you, like I said, they made you care about Ratcatcher and Ratcatcher 2 or Ratcatcher 3. I can't remember which one she is. They made you care about Polka Dot Man.
Right.
It's like, what?
Yeah.
And it's totally bizarre. I mean, it's not canonical to the comics, the whole thing with his mother. but still, you care about him. You're like, James Gunn, you're kind of a mad genius. Mm-hmm. I do hope that the Superman movie is not a wacky farce, but a little humor is welcome.
Yeah, definitely.
Can you pull Jimmy Olsen off? The thing is, these characters are so part of his mythos that every writer that's tackled them has said, look, these characters were created in the 40s, and how are we going to make a friendship between this powerful alien god and this pesky, like, early 20s cub reporter photographer? Why do they like each other? Why would Clark like Jimmy other than he's a nice kid, wears bow ties? So, I mean, it's like, okay, can we make Lois, Clark, Jimmy, and Perry White, can we make them work in a 21st century context?
I think you can. Yeah. It's just friendship. It's a very basic thing. And to me, I kind of see
how wacky
Jimmy.
do you make them? Is Jimmy incompetent, or is he just a motor mouth? What is the take on Jimmy? It's all these things where you're like going, how do you interpret?
Well, I'm really curious to see too, like where James takes Superman's character too, because there's a lot of stuff that we didn't really get in any of the. Well, I don't know if any of them, but. The Superman that we grew up with was also, he was kind of a scientist too. He was incredibly intelligent. And didn't he actually have a lab at the fortress?
Of course. Yeah. I mean, the whole thing with, he is, of course, the ultimate Mary Sue, because over the years, the writers, and I love it, but they just kept adding stuff he could do to where he's ridiculously. It's not just the superpower. I mean, he has super ventriloquism, super hypnotism. He has the cold breath, and he does have a super brain. So yeah, he could sit there. Why hasn't he cured cancer? I don't know. He was busy that weekend. But it is that thing where he has access to Kryptonian technology. He knows how to use that, and they have shown him in comics, especially in the 70s. It was like, yeah, he'd be in a lab. He would be like, this will fix this. And he's created a solution that will do whatever, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. So, yeah, he's so ridiculously powerful. And he can fly through time. It's like, yeah, of course he can.
So that makes me think of the dynamic between him and Jimmy Olsen. To me, Jimmy is, he's kind of a nerd. He's a very enthusiastic nerd, kind of like us, and that could be a way for portraying Jimmy as sort of an everyday fan, but also somebody that Clark and Superman, they're the same guy, obviously really connects with. It's like, man, this guy's cool. I like this guy. I'm going to look after him,
Yeah, so. I always think that it's true. That's the case. I think if you wanted to do a psychological analysis, and I always do. And these are the things I think about too. It's like, well, I think Jimmy reminds him of like Pete, his best friend in Smallville, because I think Clark has a hard time when he's in Metropolis of dealing with city cynicism, big city cynicism. And Lois has a lot of that. He has to break down her defenses because she's a tough lady. She's like, yeah, man, you can't throw me, and what I jump into danger. But I think Jimmy is the nice kid. And so Clark feels protective of him, big brotherly, and he knows that Jimmy is doing his best, but Jimmy also will get into trouble. He's like going, yeah, I'll watch after this guy, because for one thing, he reminds me of like friends I had in high school, and he is not jaded. I don't think they've ever painted Jimmy Olsen as being a jaded city guy, even though I think canonically, isn't he an orphan? No, he's not an orphan. I think his father died when he was young. This is me pulling back old continuity. There's tragedy in Jimmy Olsen's backstory, but he's a resilient kid with a good heart. So I think Clark just goes, great. Because all the other friends, like he knows from The Office, Perry's got a good heart, but he's gruff. Lois is jaded. Steve Lombard, the sports guy, he's an asshole. Cat Grant, she just wants him for his sweet super hiney. He's got... So, I mean, as far as his supporting characters, Jimmy's probably the closest to him. It's like probably this. Yeah, I think.
Yeah, that's a good point.
We're similar. Other than the fact that I'm an alien god.
Right.
I'm a godlike being from another planet. It's like, no. Me and you, we could totally go to the ball game and eat hot dogs and just hang out.
Probably nerding out about science and stuff like that, which would be that would be really cool to see that. Yep. And as I mean, this is probably. I
want Inspector Henderson. I want Professor Hamilton.
Yes,
like we
have to have Hamilton. Yeah,
supporting characters. I want Star Labs mentioned. Always want Star Labs. Man, I'm a fucking nerd.
I still really, as far as all the Jimmys go, I obviously prefer Mark. Is it Mark McClure? Is that his name?
Mark McClure. Yeah.
Yeah. He just, even though they never really got that deep into his character, he was Jimmy. He was everything that we just said. They just didn't really work it into the story. He was just he's in his early
20s. He's he's not a cool dude. He's a total nerd, but he's a lovable nerd.
Yeah.
Who constantly gets flack from his boss. Lois likes him, but again, I think sort of in a pet way.
Right.
Like, oh yeah, hey Jimmy, how's it going? Hey Lois. The man's wearing a bow tie in the 1970s. God bless him. Yeah, he was a great Jimmy. They've all been good. Even the guy who played him in Superman Returns, I liked him.
He was good too. Yeah, I forget his name. We mentioned that he was actually pretty good casting for that role. And too often we talked about this before, but his casting, and I think in most other shows I've seen, including especially Supergirl, was just really seems to stem from a misunderstanding of who the character is, because they just made him so boring. I don't think it's a
misunderstanding. I think there's a lot of, and I think Snyder did a lot of this, even though that wasn't Snyder, obviously Supergirl, but it's a whole thing of, we can't just go with the classic. We have to alter it because it's too cliche. So they overthink, or they try to subvert your expectations. We know what you think Jimmy Olsen is. So now we've got James Olsen. How you doing? And you're like, well, a smooth, confident, sexy hunk Jimmy Olsen is a take. It's just not the character that we grew up with. Just like a Pa Kent that says, hide your abilities to save yourself, and I'm going to let a tornado take me away. That's a take on Pa Kent. It's not a good one, but it's just them going like, people think they know these characters. We're going to twist it.
Yeah. Well, I think and specifically with Jimmy.
Not a nice guy anymore. No more Mr. Nice Guy. Oh, I bet that's the needle drop. Is that the first trailer for James Gunn's Superman comes out, and it's him tearing people apart, and it's going, no more Mr. Nice Guy. And he's just like going, ugh. And then at the end of the trailer, he goes, fuck crime.
Yeah, shut up, crime.
Fuck evil.
But I think the problem with Supergirl was like all the CW shows. It was a CW show, so they were in that show in particular, and specifically with that show, I think they were targeting young women. So they tried to make them hunky. So I get it.
Well, yeah. I think that having an older Jimmy is fine, because the way the timeline works out, it's like Superman's been around for a while. So a Jimmy in his 20s meeting Superman's cousin. Fine, have him be older, maybe more mature, less nerdy, but just to flip him into this like, hello, how are you? Yeah, we might hook up later. I'm Jimmy Olsen. It's just
I have no interest in photojournalism anymore.
I have no interest in photojournalism anymore. I'm just an old man who sits there going, the couples I want to end up together. Jimmy ends up with Lois's sister. It's the way it's always been meant to be. Lucy Lane, Jimmy Olsen, hook up. Superman and Lois, Batman and Catwoman, Green Arrow and Black Canary. Don't get me started. Don't bring in the Felicity Smoke or whatever the fuck. No. Black Canary, Green Arrow, Green Lantern, and Carol Ferris. I want the classics. Barry Allen, fastest man alive. Only one girl for him. Iris Allen. I am literally that kind of guy who sits there going, introducing new characters is fine. And if you kill off Steve Trevor in the Wonder Woman movies, then you're allowed, I guess, to come up with a new love interest. But I always want her to end up with Steve Trevor, because these are the canonical couples. I want Aquaman and Mira to get together. In the comics, when they broke apart very violently in the 2000s, and he ends up with Dolphin, who's another underwater DC character, and she's all off on her own, going, I don't need you anymore, Arthur. You can have your little blonde. I'm doing it. I'm like, eh. But this always happens in comics because they're soap operas. So they will have these things, and then eventually some writer comes in going, nope, it was always meant to be Arthur Curry and Mira. King and Queen of Atlantis.
Yeah.
I'm such a freaking nerd.
The other thing, and this goes back to the big guns, no pun intended. But World's Finest, Come on,
Dude.
I'm so looking forward to the detective movies with Superman and Batman working. We're working together. It's gonna be so good. I'm just going on faith that he is going to do that. Like, how could he not do it?
Obviously, a Justice League movie. I can't wait seeing them. And one of the saddest things for me is watching Snyder's Justice League, and that should be all that I want. And I watch it and I go, those characters standing together, they're just not, they're so far away from what I want that I can't even be excited that that's Wonder Woman talking to Aquaman, that that's Flash hanging out with Cyborg or whoever. I can't get excited for it because those characters are wrong. But a Justice League movie done right, I can't wait for it. But to your point, wouldn't it be great if them bring Justice League together, you get a Superman Batman movie, a world's finest movie? Oh, dude.
Yes. Yeah.
And
absolutely.
They could literally take all the ideas from the radio show. You know that Batman and Robin were introduced on the radio show because the guy, the actor, Bud Collyer, who played Superman, needed a vacation.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And this is also where Kryptonite came from. Literally, It was not in the comics first. It was in the radio show. So the guy was voicing that character 5 days a week. It was a 5-day-a-week show, 15-minute episodes. And he was like, it's every week. I want to take a vacation. I've been doing this for like years. And they're like, okay. So they came up with a plot about this meteor from Krypton that lands on Earth that weakens him. And Batman and Robin enter the storyline to save Superman because they don't know what's wrong. And so they come in to save the day. So you have actors portraying Batman and Robin for like several weeks while Bud Collier's in the Bahamas going, and every time the radio show would cut back to Superman, it was another actor just going, oh, in the background, just some guy going, and they're like, we will get you help, Superman. We're your friends. So World's Finest happened in radio before it ever happened in the comics too. Those characters met in the radio show before they ever met in the comics.
Didn't they introduce flying in the radio show too? Was that?
I don't know. Jimmy was introduced in the radio show.
Was that the TV show? I can't remember.
No. Flying
because it was there by the time they did the Fleischer cartoons, it had already been introduced, right?
Yeah. It was fairly quick, but really it was all just laziness because the idea of bounding was, especially if you're animating it, it was a thing like, geez, him just having to hit Earth again and then leap again. And they're like, fuck that. Though in some of the Fleischer cartoons, he is in that pose where he's like leaping instead of full on flying. But, no, I don't think flying was introduced in the radio show, but the radio show started so quickly after the comics. The comics hit big right off the bat. So merchandising and let's do a serial, let's do this and happened immediately. He's out in 38, and by 39, the guys who run national periodicals are already millionaires, and Siegel and Schuster are going, please, sir, can I have some more? We created him. Can I have a crust of bread? I don't know why they're British. They were Jewish guys from Cleveland.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, yes, I would love that. I would love it. I always want to see him team up. The animated series did it well whenever it happened. And then into their Justice League cartoon. It was great.
And this is a bit of a nerdy divergence, but I was thinking about this recently when we were talking about Jimmy and Mark McClure and the original Superman movie. It made me think of this scene because we've talked about, the Deus Ex Machina thing where Superman turns back time or spins the Earth backwards, depending on how you interpret it.
Flies back through time. He does not turn the Earth around.
Right. So he basically goes back to where he tweaks something. We don't see exactly what he changes, but he makes it so Lois's car doesn't get fall into a crack in the Earth during an earthquake. But the earthquake apparently still happens because then Jimmy runs up and says, thanks a lot, Superman. Leave me all these rocks falling, and you, goddamn it. So apparently that still happens. So it's like, well, what did he? I'm always been curious, like, what did he do? Like, what did he change? That because clearly, I mean, apparently the nuclear bomb still hit California.
Well, when you get into the paradox of, like, if he went back and all he did was get to her sooner, then does that mean he has sacrificed the people he didn't save by building that rock dam? I've never been sure either. Did he go confusing. Back just to get to her quicker, and he still has time to stand there and chat with her for a couple of seconds? I'm like, dude, shouldn't you be building that dam? I don't know what he did. Maybe he figured out a way to do all the stuff that he originally did faster. Or it's like, now that he knows she's in danger, I will handle this in a different way quicker and then be able to get to her. And she's like, oh, geez. Oh, man. Hey, Superman. How you doing? How do you like me in my white Bee Gees outfit?
Yeah.
She's in such a Saturday Night Fever white leisure suit in that scene.
God, yeah, I love all that whole look.
The scariest thing when I was a kid watching it in the theater when it first came out was her death. That whole thing because for one thing, I'm not exactly sure how it was filmed, but real dirt is being piled on top of her. And that whole thing where she finally stops struggling and her face just goes down. And then the last of I was like, that was visceral. And he pulls her out. Oh, the scene still gets me, man.
Yeah, Donner knocked it out of the park with that scene.
And when his emotional reaction, Chris Reeve,
it's so good. That little whimper he lets out right before that big scream.
Yeah, he goes,
it's so well.
Like, no.
Yeah.
Oh,
that was performance, clearly art, but that was camera work, that was editing and sound design. Just brilliant symphony of just brilliant work.
And him flying off in a rage. The whole thing about him being too light and fluffy and boyish or whatever the stuff they always load on him. I'm like going, don't you see part of being Superman is he is human. He has those emotions too. He has to keep them in check. And that's why that scene resonates, because you're like he
just lets it go.
He just lets it go. And you're like going, a guy like that in a rage through pain or whatever, that is frightening. And actually I'm sitting there going, the very fact that he does not on a daily basis just lose his shit and go, that's it, I'm taking over. You people are garbage. And you know what?
Fuck all y'all.
I'm not king. Guess what? I'm king. Who's going to stop me? Stop fucking around. Superman's control of himself. I mean, that makes it sound like he's an aesthetic, like he's a monk, but in a weird way, and that's true of a lot of very powerful characters and
Jedi.
It's like, you know what? Obviously I will fall in love. I will hate people or be angry at people, but I have a responsibility not to just let myself go into that, because otherwise I will punch my head through his atoms and his head will disappear in a pink mist. It just won't even be there anymore. Right. In fact, I won't even punch. I'll just do this with my finger. And there's parts of The Boys. Did you watch The Boys, by the way?
Oh, yeah.
And the comic did as well, where it's like, I know it's grim, and I know that that's commentary on comics, but they do those things where they're like going, yeah, if someone as powerful as this just didn't like you anymore, or just like going, they could just pop your head off and it would just be horrible and gruesome. And I enjoy it. At the same time, that's not a universe I want to hang out in.
No, even my mom likes that show.
What?
I think she loves it.
Can she take that gore?
Yeah. She's like, oh, did you see the latest Boys? It's so great.
See the thing where the little man shrunk down and he went inside the penis of his boyfriend and then he expanded and blew him up? Was that just me that saw that?
That's the thing about the show that cracks me up. It's not every time, but it's like, seems like 99% of the deaths is just everybody just explodes. It doesn't matter what the manner of death is. Like when they die is.
Well, yeah. Well, you also have, of course, the lady whose power is making people's heads pop.
Right.
Pretty awesome. Yeah. No, I like it. I'm always down for it, as pure and holy as we like to sound about comics, where are delightful. Superheroes are, beacons. I like when people do dark takes on them, because I don't mind an alternative viewpoint. What I mind is if it becomes the default. Like, I've read great parodies. The Brat Pack from back in the late 80s, that was Rick Veitch, his very dark take on teen superheroes. Obviously, I love Watchmen. It is a masterpiece, the best comic ever written. I'm sorry, it just is. And it's, I guess I should say best superhero comic, because there are amazing graphic novels that have nothing to do with superheroes. But, I mean, the dark takes, the commentary, I'm fine with, because it is like people with discriminating minds looking at what a superhero universe would be and going, Jesus, this wouldn't work at all.
Yeah.
Or it would be a nightmare.
Yeah.
But I like it in the way I like it when I'm 8. I like the superhero showing up and saving people.
Yeah. That's why I think we've had enough of that, the dark aspect of it, because that's kind of where Snyder was going with his stuff too, and it's like he came already.
He's our age or younger. He's probably younger, and I think he's
actually a couple years older than us. I checked.
Is he?
Yeah.
Well, for him,
a year or two older.
He gravitated to the 80s because I think that point he's like, that's when comics grew up and they got badass. Meaning he loves all that 90s stuff that spilled out of it. Alan Moore now thinks anyone who reads comics, especially adults, are losers. He's gone full to the other side. But before he went there, he would be interviewed about Watchmen and all that, and he would say, I actually kind of regret doing Watchmen. Because, he goes, my intention was never to have people, use that as a template. He goes, it was a self-contained, here's my comment on superheroes. And then it sold so well, got so much critical acclaim, that thanks to Frank Miller, Dark Knight and all that, and Watchmen, that's what spun us into the 90s, which is the worst decade of comics ever, superhero comics, because they're like, let's copy the wrong lessons from Alan Moore and Frank Miller. What people want now are shady superheroes, hyper violent. They want this because it's more real, it's gritty, and like, no, it's okay in small doses or as a commentary. But people coming up that were teens at that time are going, yeah, this is extreme. That's what I want. And so it was an entire decade of that, and people just going, please stop. And finally, you had good writers like Kurt Busiek and Mark Waid are like going, can we steer the stuff out of that? Can we go back to liking them again? Hey, can Superman be all right and not be dead? Hey, can Batman not have his back broken for a little bit? Can he come back now? Can Jason Todd not have been beaten to death by the Joker with a crowbar?
Yeah.
Did you vote for that, by the way? Did you call in on the Will Robin Live or Die? That was back in the 80s. Did you call in on that?
Oh, no. When was this?
They set it up as a 976 number, like a pay thing. So that miniseries, A Death in the Family, was coming out, and it had Jason Todd get beaten by the Joker with a crowbar, or he's captured by the Joker, and then they had an ad saying, "Does he live or die?" And it was up to the fans to call in. It was like 50 cents a call.
Yeah.
And they did say fuck him.
What year was this? Do you remember?
86, maybe.
Okay. Yeah, because I had checked. There was a long period in the 80s where I just wasn't tuned into comics at all, and it was Nathan who kind of pulled me back in. Because the summer of 1987, he came to hang out.
Nathan introduced me to From Hell.
From Hell.
From Hell, Alan Moore's Jack the Ripper. I remember.
Oh yeah.
Nathan going, have you read this? It's the guy who did Watchmen. I was like, oh, the guy who did Watchmen is doing a historical thing about Jack the Ripper. He's like, it's so good.
Yeah. He brought a stack of comics. So you got to read this. He brought the Watchmen. He brought, he got me up to date on Crisis. I think I'd heard about Crisis and Infinite Earths, but I hadn't really, I didn't really know much about it. Swamp Thing. Alan Moore Swamp Thing.
Unbelievable.
And a bunch of other cool stuff. And Sandman. That was the other big one. So I absorbed all this stuff in that with that 1 year period, whenever that was, because Sandman had just started coming out. I think
that's a mind blower. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all at this point. There have been treatises written about the turn that American comics took in the 80s, thanks to things like Crisis and Dark Knight and Watchmen. and also the success of the X-Men and the death of Phoenix, and comics were maturing, and it did hit like a hammer. It happened all kind of around that time. Now, the death of Robin is very cynical, and that's a lot of people pointing to it as being like, Jesus Christ, having people phone in and vote on the life or death of a character is so grim. And people didn't like Jason Todd by and large, simply because he was the first replacement Robin. They didn't write him well. I have to say that he was an obnoxious character, but I didn't vote. But I would have voted to have him live because that is so grim. But people did. They voted for him to die in the next issue. He's killed. And then, of course, that's just so 80s. And then Batman is racked with guilt and never again. And Nightwing is running around still with the Teen Titans going, oh, Jason died? Oh, that sucks. I'm going to go bone this alien chick. And I think that's the exact dialogue. But I'm happy over here with the Titans. Really sorry about your new partner. Gotta go. Oh, that's not quite it. But it just led to the overall darkening of tone that became the default through the 90s. And yeah, it was not a fun time. But you did have things like Sandman coming out.
Yeah, so there was a lot of exciting stuff in that period. Sorry, do you still have time to talk about Sandman?
I need to go in a little bit here. I know we were going to talk about Sandman, the series. Yeah, let's save it for next time.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I mean, spoiler for everyone who hasn't watched it, watch it already.
Yes.
Just watch it already.
I'm so excited.
It's been sitting on Netflix waiting for you.
And I'd kind of forgotten that that's another DC property that I'm pretty sure James is not going to touch, because there's been so much speculation. Is like, well, we're going to build on what's working, and some people are taking that to mean, well, maybe he'll keep some stuff that we want from the Justice League stuff. I don't think that's what that means.
I don't think that's what that means.
I think he means, stuff like Sandman, stuff like Matt Reeves' The Batman.
Sure.
Anything that is doing well may hang around.
Between now and our next podcast, I'll look into I'd like to look into the production background of Sandman, because I wonder how much Warner Brothers has to do with that at all.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not independent. It is owned by DC, owned by Warner Brothers, but they never considered it under the umbrella of the DC, formerly EU. The Vertigo titles, I'm sure I don't want to see a sequel to Constantine. Constantine was fun, but again, that's not the character. The dude that they had on Legends of Tomorrow, the blonde British guy, was Closer. And I liked his little series, which didn't last very long, but it was good. Hellblazer. Yeah. But those things could end up coming back in totally different forms on Netflix or whatever, not having anything to do with HBO. Shade the Changing Man. Why not? That's trippy, crazy, go nuts. Do it. I'd watch the fuck out of that. Swamp Thing, they gave a go on
HBO.
Yeah.
Or what was it?
So it was
short-lived DC channel. DC Universe. Yes. What was it called?
I had it. And then it was just folded into
HBO Max.
Yeah. Doom Patrol, great. Loved it. I liked Stargirl quite a bit.
I haven't seen that.
It's for kids. I mean, it's not just for kids, but I was surprised at how they just said, we're not bothering to explain the Justice Society, but they're here. You're just going to have to deal with, there was a Flash who had a helmet. You're going to have to deal with old Green Lantern and stuff. And here are their legacy characters in a high school setting, that kind of thing. A little CW-ish there. But Stargirl was good. Titans is a little much. It's a little grim dark for me.
It's too dark. Yeah. It's too dark.
I'm sitting there going, I can't believe Hawk and Dove have been there. They are. And it's like
Hawk and Dove and Starfire and all these people. I'm dying. It suffers from the same thing as a lot of these shows, like Doom Patrol, the first season in particular, I think really, for me anyway, suffered from low budget effects.
Yeah.
And it's really hard for me to hang on to it. Titan's the same thing. It's like Gar is forced to just be a tiger all the time. And Starfire just basically just blows stuff up and doesn't really.
They also do a thing where I always like the idea of mutants in Marvel that can't hide what they are. And I always like that about the Titans as well. And that was a big part of the reason that Cyborg and Garfield, Changeling, become such good friends. They can't hide who they are. Neither can Starfire.
Yeah, he's just green all the time. Yeah.
In this show, Garfield, his hair is green. He doesn't turn green until he starts to change into something. Right. And Starfire is not orange skinned all the time with big green eyes. That only happens when she powers up and shoots rays. And you're like, I kind of like it if aliens and mutants are kind of like, well, they're just going to be looked at as freaks unless they're saving people because there's a green dude. Yeah. And so they've given them easy outs. Yeah. Oh, Starfire can just walk around and look like this very sexy African-American lady. It's like, oh, hey lady, how you doing? But when then she powers up and her hair gets all what you want it to be from the comics and her eyes are glowing green. I'm like, you're almost Starfire. Zap, zap.
It's kind of like what my complaint with Firestorm in the Arrowverse stuff that it was great at moments, but they clearly could not afford to keep doing him every week. Even when they went to the second version of Firestorm, who was in Legends of Tomorrow, he just constantly was having he either couldn't power up because there was something going wrong with the physics of the bonding between him and the professor, or they would just write him out of the episode.
I hate it when they nerf characters, but I do understand budgetary concerns. It's like in Infinity War, the whole thing with Bruce Banner being unable to turn into the Hulk because the Hulk is refusing to come out. And I'm like, okay, so they put him in the big Hulkbuster armor so he can run around, but that's them basically saying if the Hulk had been there, he could have wiped out that entire army. So they nerf in Endgame, they nerf Doctor Strange a little because I'm sitting there going, he's so incredibly powerful, but in Endgame, while they're all trying to fight Thanos, all he's doing is preventing a flood. He's using his powers to keep a huge wall of water. He's like, you guys take care of Thanos. I'll make sure you don't get damp, is basically. And I'm like,
they nerfed a lot of characters in that.
They did.
That scene.
But still, they did have a moment where fucking Captain Marvel comes in and it's her against Thanos and she's knocking the shit out of him.
Yeah. Ooh. They did. I mean, they did kind of try to address that, because Thanos was essentially getting lucky, here and there. When I forget exactly what he does. He kind of messes with the stones a little bit to overpower Captain Marvel.
Is that?
There's something he takes one stone out of the gauntlet.
I don't remember
uses
him
at the punch or something.
Out.
Yeah, there's something weird going on he gets clever with the stones to overpower.
Never get clever with the stones, man. I've told you that before.
I have to watch it again, but they did try to address there
are a couple of
the insanity of it. Yeah.
Yes, but having a character like that is tough, and I know that they're trying to set up Kang to be the next big bad and I'm excited about that. He's not that physically powerful, but he is the time traveling conqueror, and I can't wait. Mm-hmm. See, Marvel they get me, man.
Yeah. And again, about Firestorm, I really hope that this is on his slate. If he announces Firestorm as part of the original announcement, I'm going to be so fucking happy.
Firestorm would be awesome. Now, I guarantee you we will get Zatanna. Because her popularity has grown over the years, and she's sexy. So I guarantee we'll probably get a Zatanna project, whether it's a movie or a TV show. They would be dumb not to. I'm trying to think of who else is likely. I bet they do Vixen, who's always a great JLA member. But speaking of diversity, she's a great character. She deserves her own spotlight. And in a Vixen show, they could probably also bring in Animal Man as maybe a friend or mentor or cohort. That would make a lot of sense. Firestorm would be great because that goes straight to our 80s childhood, because they brought him in as we were kids and we're like, hey, a teenager.
With the Professor Buddy, which kind of predated Back to the Future, which I was just thinking about.
Yeah, it's true.
Because they could kind of do that dynamic, the Professor Brown Marty thing.
Rick and Morty with it.
I mean, they could. I mean, not make it that wacky, obviously, but they need to go there with that relationship and have it be, the weirdness that they're actually become one person and have to figure out how to work together. To see a fully powered Firestorm, I'm so excited for. I fully realize too.
He's another tricky character, power wise, because, and this bothered me in the comics. if your power is it's just like Molecule Man over in Marvel. If you can control the molecular structure of anything, you're the most powerful being.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, you just are.
So they need to figure out some way to rein that in a little bit.
Well, they usually have it be, he has to know. He just has to understand them. So it's like Professor Stein was always going, this is how you make salt. You know, he'd be like, oh, okay. But in other words, he wouldn't be able to look at Superman and automatically know Kryptonian physiology or molecular structure. But if he did learn it, he could just go, and now, you're a kiwi fruit. I just turned Superman into a kiwi fruit. Don't fuck with me. I'm Firestorm, and I can control everything. He's a scary, powerful character. Yeah, I'd love to see that. Dude, there's not a character that I wouldn't love to see. I got excited. Do you hear about? Oh, I really should go soon. But okay. Donald Glover. Did you see that announcement?
No. What's going on?
Because he was in Spider-Man Homecoming as a character that we know ends up being the Prowler. Right. But we see him before he's got gear and stuff. So I'm always thinking, I hope he comes back and is the Prowler because it's a great character and I love him. He's great. He's coming back to Sony to do another Spider-Man movie, but not as that character. Because he's got cachet. Mm-hmm. He said, well, yeah, I want to come back, but I'm going to write this one and I'm going to star in it as an obscure Spider-Man character. And they're like, oh, who do you want to be? He's like, the Hypno-Hustler.
I know nothing of a Hypno-Hustler.
He's a very obscure villain from the 70s, and he's a Spider-Man villain. And since it's under the Sony umbrella because they own all of Spider-Man, he's like, I want to do Hypno-Hustler. And Sony said, okay, because he's Donald Glover. And they're like, people will go see it.
Wow.
And this has literally been greenlit.
Wow.
I mean, we've got a Craven movie coming up, which sounds totally bonkers. It sounds wrong. He's an eco guy. He wants to protect the animals. I'm like, Craven the Hunter, the guy who wears a lion's face on his chest? Okay. That wears leopard spot tighties? I'm like, fuck that. But yeah, it's just, I think they just said, whatever you want, Donald. You want to do Hypno-Hustler? You're doing Hypno-Hustler.
So we're going to have the Spider-Verse. We're going to have the Venom-verse. Yeah. And the Hypno-Hustler verse.
Well, I think Venomverse, Cravenverse, and Hypno-Hustler verse will all be the same because it's Sony's work. And Morbius, that'll be the same verse. Yeah, and Spider-Man is still being shared out. Mm-hmm. And they'll probably continue to talk about him in Venom movies and stuff, but he won't show up. Or maybe he will.
Guy.
I hate that guy who I've never met.
Yeah.
Hypno-Hustler. We're going to get a Hypno-Hustler movie. Cool. Anything can happen. I'm going to dig out all my old scripts. Here's my Creeper script. Oh, I would fucking
That's right. I was thinking about that the other day. I kept trying to remember what that character's name was. Because the Creeper. There's another thing I had no idea about, and you laid it out in detail, as you do with all your script ideas. They turned into 2-hour, 3-hour conversations at House of Pies.
Because don't get me started. I'll tell you all my stories. But and again, that will be me in the old folks' home. Let me tell you about the time I came up with this idea for Brave Star, the cartoon, but as a gritty Western. Where are you going? But no, my Creeper script, I dug it out fairly recently and read it over. It is so dated. All of my references are dated because it was written in the early 90s. Yeah. And I wrote him as like a shock jock TV host a la Morton Downey Jr. Remember Morton Downey Jr.? Mm-hmm. So I'm like, those things don't even exist anymore. And there's references to phone sex lines. And I'm like, oh boy, this is just old. But my take on the character I still like a lot. And a lot of the stuff in it would just have to be severely updated. Mm-hmm. But the Creeper's a great character. And another one I thought, visually, that's why I decided to write a screenplay. I'm like, when you see the world through Creeper vision, when you're seeing his POV, it's all bizarre, surrealist, non sequitur stuff because he's tripping balls. Yeah. When he's the Creeper, he sees the world as this weird cartoon landscape. So I was describing stuff like 20-foot versions of those cymbal clapping monkeys and stuff like that, and you know, flamingos flying upside down and just going through, and he's like, ah. And I'm like, that's what I want, is something visual besides his super heroics that you cut to creeper vision and you're like, God damn, I'm not on nearly enough mushrooms. So anywho,
that would be amazing.
So on that note, I'm going to let you go, and our people, I hope everyone's enjoyed us talking for the 18th straight week about Jimbo Gunn, our favorite mixed martial arts fighter.
That might have to be the episode title of this one. Jimbo Gunn.
But take care of yourself, Mr. Smalley. We can only hope that these things go well, because we're nerdy fans who deserve to be treated well.
Yeah.
You want my $12? You better do something I like.
And my heart goes out to everybody whose heart is still broken over the Cavill situation.
I understand. I do understand.
Come together, everybody.
Come together for the character's sake. It's bigger than any actor, director, writer.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to hit stop.